So, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Pony Club Victoria webinar with our guest presenter, Mary Longden. Tonight, we are presenting part 3 of our schooling, coaching and performance. It's for grade 1 and advanced levels tonight. Pony Club Victoria have released onto the website the new dressage tests for grades 1 through to 5. And these tests are available for use by clubs effective immediately, but will be compulsory to use from 1st of January 2021. The new tests will be used at the 2021 State Championships, and Pony Club Victoria will be using tests 2 and 3 for grades 1 through to grade 4, and for advanced level, we will be using tests 1 and 2. Before starting our presentation, I'd like to introduce Mary. Mary is well known as a coach and former Grand Prix and 3-day event I-level judge, and she's also judged at Pony Club Victoria State events. And she is judged at Olympic and World Championship level in para-equestrian. Mary has a master's in special education, and her interest lies in coaching both able-bodied and people with disability. She is also a coach educator. She has a real interest in grassroots coaching and ensuring that people are able to ride to the best of their ability. Mary has been lucky to travel all over the world to do just this. We hope you enjoy tonight's presentation and pick up some great tips and tricks to help you ride these new tests or coach riders at this level. So thank you, Mary, and over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. We can get on to the next slide, which is, here is Caitlin, and this is a typical grade 1 horse that goes in a nice round outline and is relaxed, which is what we're looking for. And then it can build up strength. Now, this is the book we've been talking about. It is very expensive, but it covers all the movements and the paces and how the judges judge them. So if you're advanced and you're doing flying changes and you make an error, then you can see exactly what mark you're going to get. It's a really good handbook for people. So anyone that's really serious about their dressage, you should have a look, because you need to see what the judge is judging on, what their criteria is. Okay, next one. Now, this is just what the presentation will cover, which is the expectations at the 2 levels, how learning happens, the dressage scale that people talk about, and then how to train and perform. I realized I couldn't cover everything, so I decided I'd cover these things. And then the quality of the paces and the transitions, and it's really important, the timing. The higher up you get with your dressage, the more important it is to have really good timing. So as a coach, you need to experiment with this timing so that when you teach it, that's going to really help your riders. And then at some point, so people in the lower grades tend to ride a test. When you get up in the higher grades, you actually want to be able to perform one. And that's all about how much can you risk and how much preparation do you want. And so once you can get like 6 through the whole test, 6 for everything, then you can start to say, okay, now I can start to risk a bit more. And you might get a 9 or you might get a 4. But it's all about being able to perform. Okay. Now, so the expectations, and these come out of the Pony Club guidelines, is harmony, which you saw in that photograph. There definitely was harmony, and moving freely on the bit. Now, and in the last session, I talked about the difference between being in a round outline and being on the bit. So first of all, the horse has to be round and in self-carriage, and then it almost does a transition to on the bit where the horse is taking the contact. So on the bit is all about contact. a well-balanced and effective position, effective sitting trot, and accuracy. And on to the next one, which is the different paces. So it's the trot, there isn't any working trot at all. It's all collected and medium. Now, the collected trot that you see in grade 1 is not the same, and also in elementary EA tests, it's not the same collection as you will find in a Grand Prix test, because they almost should have different levels of collection. So this is the beginning of collection. But what people tend to do at this level is they go, oh, I have to make the steps shorter and higher. And so they actually pull the horse in from in front instead of riding the horse up from behind, so that as the joints of the hind legs bend more, the horse's front end will come up itself. If you try and shorten the front end, you get all kinds of problems. You'll get in the trot, you'll get them coming wide behind when they do medium trot. The walk, you can get an ambling walk, and the canter, you can get a 4-beat canter, which is really hard to correct. So you should be looking at the quality of all the paces. The rein back in grade 1, it says 3 to 4 steps. So if you do 3 good steps, then you can go forward, or you can do 4, it doesn't matter. But what you're looking for with the rein back, which I don't talk about anywhere else, is that it's a diagonal movement. So it's a 2-beat movement, not a 4-beat movement. So just make sure, and if you get someone to video you doing rein back, then you can play it back and you can have a look. Is it 2-beat or is it 4-beat? Okay, and then the movements that you actually, in the walk, it's a turn on the hindquarters, which we talk about later. And then trot, you've suddenly got a whole lot of new stuff: shoulder in, travers, renvers, 10-meter circles, and then in canter, also 10-meter circles, counter canter, simple changes, 3-loop serpentines. So you have to be very careful that you don't suddenly go, well, tomorrow I'm going to be in grade 1, so we need to learn all these things today. It's a gradual thing, which we'll talk about in a minute with how horses learn. Okay. And here we've got power and balance and movement and harmony. So this is what you're looking at. You're looking at the horse, which is clearly on the bit. It is clearly taking Lauren's hands, and the pole is pretty high, and you can see the joints of the hind legs really bending, and that allows the horse to push. Okay, Flower Vale have bred some beautiful horses. Okay. Now in the advanced, they talk about the training scale, which I will be going over in a minute. So rhythm, the Pony Club talk about looseness, the FEI talk about relaxation. The Pony Club talk about contact and acceptance of the bit, which is the same thing as connection, which is what we saw in that last photograph. Impulsion, straightness, and collection. The purity of the gaits is just so important. It's so very easy on the way up to lose their quality. And the tricks are only as good as the quality of the paces that you ride them in. So people tend to say, oh yeah, my horse is at this level because it can do changes or it can do half pass, but it's also got to be how the horse is going. So we've got the collection, which allows the lightening of the forehand rather than the pulling the horse back from in front. Then you get your soft and steady contact. And so on the bit is the horse seeking the rider's contact, actually taking the contact. And we don't like the horse behind the vertical, because if you picture the horse in trot, if they can't put their front foot down, in front of a line, you draw down the horse's face. So when the horse is behind the vertical, the shoulders move, the front leg comes out, but then it comes back before it gets put down on the ground. And that is a very bad fault. So try and keep the horses vertical. Okay. And then the paces, so the walk, they add extended walk and not collected walk, but to do a walk pirouette, you actually have to have a collected walk. So they're calling it a shortened walk. And then in trot, collected, medium and extended, and then the same with the canter, and also the release of the reins. And the rein back is specifically 4 steps, so you have to be a bit more accurate. Okay. And then the movements, the walk pirouette, shoulder in, half pass, 10-meter circles. So you can see that it's so much happens in grade 1. And then if that is good, then it's easy to continue on to the advanced movements, which really are the half pass and the single flying changes. Okay, so on to the next, which is, here is the German training scale, which is now accepted as the FEI training scale. The thing about it is, and this is where people get muddled, it only starts when your horse is forward at the correct tempo and straight and is in self-carriage. When you have that, then you can start working on, have you got the rhythm, the energy and the tempo and the suppleness, and then the contact with the rein, and that gives you more impulsion and more thrust, and that also allows a higher degree of straightness. So the straightness that you see there is a continuation of the straightness where your horse becomes in self-carriage, and then you can go on to a higher degree of collection. But the collection up there is much more so than you're going to be having in grade 1 and grade 1 advanced. So the training, it's quite interesting with the training scale. It became very popular, and then people decided that maybe you can't actually go all the way up because every horse is different. They have different qualities and problems. But these are the things that you will be looking at, and the training scale comes in to the FEI dressage handbook with what the judges are looking for. Okay, then next one, please. Now I would want to go very quickly over this because this is what I've used for many, many years. And as riders, you also have to teach your horse. So you're a teacher and you're a coach of your horse. And anybody who's a coach, you teach a skill and then you coach it. So if we go to the bottom right-hand side, number 1, if you're teaching your horse to do something and he doesn't know how to do it, he is unable. He may also be unwilling, particularly if he's had a fright and somebody's tried to teach him how to do it beforehand. So we have to show the horse what we want, and we have to 100% teach. So don't presume that the horse is going to understand what you're asking it to do. So if you want to do flying changes, and that is the big thing that's come into Pony Club, you've got to make sure you've got the prerequisites, which are that the horse is forward in self-carriage and he's straight, and you can change the flexion from left to right easily. So you have your prerequisites, and then you cut it down. There are different ways of teaching flying changes, which I'll talk about later. But you do a flying change and either it works or it doesn't work. Then when you come to square 2, the horse, yeah, it's sort of got the idea that you want to be going one way and then you're going to be going the other way on the other leg. And so the horse is quite willing to do it. And this is when you have to decide on your method. So are you going to come down the center line and then go across to E or B and then go down the long side? And when your horse is balanced, then are you going to do the change, or are you going to do it out of a circle? It doesn't matter. That's the method that you're going to do. Then the sequence of aids is when you give each aid. And the interesting thing about the flying change is some horses like you to change the flexion early, other ones like to change, and just as they're changing, then the flexion is changed. But the main thing with all the teaching is to make it error-free. So if you can teach something which is then correct, then you come on to coaching, which is square 3, and the person is able to do it. But the importance of square 3 is it's your last chance to change something. So if you have a flying change, for instance, which is always late behind, if you don't change it, if you don't correct it in square 3, when it comes to square 4, which is automatic, there's no thought involved. And it's at that level that you have a performance level. So if you're teaching shoulder in and you give the aids and the horse goes straight into it and keeps their rhythm and tempo, then you go, yes, the horse is at square 4. If you come into it and your horse is coming off the track and you can't get the flexion right, then think about square 2. Is your method right? Are your sequence of aids right? Because you've got to come back there, make it correct. Then when you think it's correct, you coach it. So as a coach, you're not telling the person, do this with your inside leg and this with your outside leg. You're commenting on what they're doing, because when you're coaching something, the rider has become responsible for it. When you're teaching something, you're responsible. And I think it's the same with the horse as well. So are you teaching it something it doesn't know, or are you perfecting something that it understands? So all the time when you're training the horses and you're training a rider, you are going, does the horse or does the rider understand what it is you're asking them to do? And yes, teenagers will often go, yes, of course he understands. And as a coach, you say, well, let's pretend he doesn't and let's reteach him. Because how can the horse understand something that he hasn't been taught? Not very easily. Okay, so we'll go on to the next slide, which is, this is just because it can be muddling. When you come up and you start to ride these things, you've got to be very clear that what the coach is saying and how you interpret what the coach is saying is the same thing. So if you think of doing shoulder in right, you have flexion and bend to the right. And then with travers right, you still have the flexion and bend to the right. So your right leg is your inside leg. Then you're still going to the right, but you're doing renvers. So the shoulders are in off the track and the horse is flexed to the left. So your inside leg is your left leg, even though it's on the outside of the arena. So as a coach, you need to make sure that the rider understands that you're both speaking the same language. Otherwise, they can be doing the wrong aid because they've misinterpreted what it is you're asking them to do. So it's always the aids is inside to the flexion. So if you're doing renvers left, yeah, I just talked about that. The left leg is on the inside. Now it's the same with counter-canter. So if you're on the left lead going to the right, your left leg is the inside leg. And you have just a little bit of flexion. Okay, so as a coach, just don't presume that your riders understand what's the inside and what's the outside. Okay. Now, video analysis is really important at this stage. So you might do a test and then you have to have a look at what is good first. We're all really good at being negatively critical, but we're not nearly so good as being positively analyzing what's happening. So you first of all look at the good things, then you identify a fault, and then you find the cause of the fault, because what you see is the result, it's not the cause. Then you want to work out how to avoid the fault occurring. If, for instance, it was a problem at the halt, take it out of context. Don't keep practicing it on the center line. Otherwise, you'll completely ruin the halt forever. So you take it onto the long side first. Then you would take it onto the quarter line. And when you think it's absolutely good, then you can come in at A and do a halt on the center line. Now, I just want to give you an example of how I analyze things. So it's been my job with Para Question to work all over the world and at a Paralympic level. And this is how you get there. So it's actually no different from those of you that want to become Grand Prix riders. So this is how I would analyze the first movement of a test. So was the entry on the best rein for a straight entry? So if you come in on your horse's stiffer side, they stay much straighter than, so if the horse is going to fall on the left shoulder and you come in on the right rein, the horse will drift to the left. If you come in on the left rein, then you can keep control of the shoulder. So did you enter in the right direction? Was the track the correct shape so the horse could stay in balance? So people do really weird entrances, and so the horse has lost its balance before it ever gets there. Was the entry at the correct tempo and outline, and was it exactly in the middle of the center line? So people tend to think so long as they go through the gap, it doesn't matter where they go. It does matter. Was the straightness maintained from A to X? Was the horse forward and tracking up? Did the horse shorten the steps but keep the tempo approaching the halt? Was the preparation to halt correctly timed? Was the halt directly from the trot with no walk steps, if this is what you're expected to do? Was the halt straight? Was it immobile before the salute? Did the horse's head stay straight during the halt? Did the horse stay in the same outline into the halt? Were the legs square? And if they were square, were the hind legs trailing, so behind the horse, but still square? Did the horse keep its pole up? Was there submission without resistance? Was the move off straight? Did the move off stay in the correct outline? Was the move off straight into the correct trot tempo and impulsion? Did he stay straight until the turn at C? Was there flexion before the turn? Did the outline stay steady? Did the horse stay on the center line immediately before it turned? Did the inside hind leg follow the track of the inside front leg on the turn? Did the horse show bend and stay tracking up? Were the tempo, outline, and impulsion maintained on the turn? Was the rider centered and straight in the saddle in the entry, halt, and move off? Were the rider's aids unobtrusive? So that's just before you, that's the first movement. And so you need to be looking at, and then it could have been that they then have to do medium trot on the diagonal or shoulder in down the long side. So you want to analyze every bit of that with the preparation, with the tempo, the rhythm. Was the rider's position straight? Because it's very easy to start to stick crooked in the saddle without realizing that. So video analysis is really good, but please don't forget to be positive about it. So as a coach, you might say, so when the horse came into the halt, its quarters went left. What can we do about it? So you suddenly make it a positive thing, not a negative thing. Okay. And some of your riders will love analyzing and other ones won't. Now, here, this is just to show what engagement is. So the horse on the left is in quite a nice outline for a preliminary novice standard horse, but you can see that the joints of the hind legs aren't really bending very much. And then the one on the right, that is what engagement is, where the leg is off the ground more. And you can just see here, why I really like this photograph is you can see that if you get the hind end working, then the front end can come up. So the horse on the left, the front end can't come up because the hind end isn't engaged enough. Okay. Next one. Now here, I've done rather bad drawings, but the three little squiggles on the bottom are if you have a small working trot, your medium trot will be small and your collected trot will also be small. The one on the top, you have a bigger working trot, which then gives you a bigger medium and a much higher collected trot. So you can only develop what you have, or you can only use what you've developed at the working paces. Okay. Now here we've got suspension with all four legs off the ground. You can see that the horse is actually going to be traveling, and it looks like an event horse. It looks pretty fit, and the pole is up. So that, mind you, when you take a photograph, it's only a snapshot of a moment. If it was going to be a little bit more engaged, if you look at the shoe of the outside front and the inside hind, the foot has actually gone beyond the vertical. So if it's really engaged, it doesn't flip backwards. It stays vertical to the ground. But otherwise, that's a very nice photograph. Thank you, Caitlin. Okay, now the timing of the aids is really important. Riders tend to want to give too many aids at once, and the horse can't interpret. They can only interpret one aid at a time. So if you pull and kick at the same time, the horse has got to choose which one he wants to listen to and try and work out what it is. So just get used to, particularly with the lateral work and stuff. So you check the roundness, then you flex them in, then you bend them in, but it's all one thing at a time. Also, you have to be able to feel what's happening underneath you. If you can't feel, and some people don't ride very well, but they have excellent feel and excellent timing. And then other people can look terrific riders, but they can't actually feel what's happening. So if you can feel, then you know what you have to correct and what you have to maintain. And also you can then work out how much you're going to risk. So you could be coming across to do medium or extended trot on the diagonal, and you just feel, no, he's not quite balanced. So I'll do it, but I'm not going to do a big one. Or you come round wildly excited because everything underneath you feels really good. And then you can just let the horse lengthen and then he'll come back to you. So feel is something that I think all your riders should just, when you're warming up, just say to yourself when all the different legs are coming on the ground when you're walking, so you can really feel what's happening. Okay. Now, we talked about corners right from the first presentation, but it becomes a little bit more refined now. And every time you go around a corner, it should take 3 strides, and it doesn't matter what pace you're in or what kind of, whether it's a medium or a collected. If you're thinking of 3 strides, that brings you very nicely through the corner, and then you're able to come on the diagonal or down the long side or into shoulder in. So when you're riding your corners, so you come down the long side, check the roundness, then so for 2 or 3, 1 or 2 strides, you want to have the flexion, and then you can get the bend. Yeah, and so if you're in a medium canter, no, I don't think your tests do that, but if you were in walk, it's going to be a smaller corner than you would be doing in collected canter, for instance. And then you're looking at the same tempo and rhythm, the pole staying the highest point, the inside hind leg following. Horses that are stiff tend to follow one way, and the other way, the inside hind leg shoots to the outside. And all the strides should look the same, whether they're on the long side or coming through the corner. And videoing, getting somebody to video you riding some corners is really good, because then you can have a look at the good and the bad bits of it. Okay. Now, the half pirouette left. So in grade 1, you have to do the turn on the hindquarters, which is the same, except you're allowed to make it slightly bigger. But this is the FEI diagram, and it just shows how the horse comes around the inside hind leg and finishes up where he starts. Okay. So the turn on the hindquarters, it's the same as the walk pirouette, except you're allowed to ride a half. The hindquarters will come on a 2-meter radius. And that is because turn on the haunches is ridden in medium walk, and a walk pirouette is ridden in a collected walk, which in the Pony Club, where it's being introduced, it says shortened walk. So, okay, on to the next one. So when you shorten the walk, it keeps the same tempo. So I'm calling this walk pirouette, but it's the same it's the same everything as the turn on the hindquarters. So the preparation, you collect the walk, you shorten the steps with your seat, and then your arms do a shorter following, because you follow the length of the stride. So when you want it shorter, by shortening your seat and shortening your arms, the following, then the walk becomes shorter but higher. If you just slow it down, then the steps get shorter, but they don't collect. It's not what you want. And then you flex them to the inside. Now, this is where, how does the horse know the difference between riding a small circle and coming on a pirouette? Well, it's quite easy if the first aid you're going to use, so you have your horse flex to the inside, then the inside hand opens inwards just a little bit, just as the inside front leg is coming off the ground, because that's the time when the leg can move. And if you were going to do a circle, you wouldn't be using an opening inside rein. So then it becomes very obvious to the horse that you want him to turn. And then because you can't use all the aids at the same time, you ask him to come around, and then the outside aids tell him to move, and then you ask again and move. And then you don't want to be using too much inside leg, because horses move away from the leg. So you're probably going to start the turn, and then after a couple of steps, you may then need to use a little bit of inside leg. But to start with, make it very simple for the horse, so the horse actually understands it's coming around the inside hind leg. And now with your upper body, if you all of you just stand up now and put your legs as if they're in a riding position, so have a little bit of a bend, and first of all, bring your inside shoulder back. And you will see that when you do that, it pushes your outside hip out. Whereas do it now, just bring your outside shoulder forward, and you'll find that your hip doesn't go out. So bringing your inside shoulder back or bringing your outside shoulder forward isn't the same thing. So when you're turning, you want to keep your shoulders parallel to the horse. Now, when you want to get a really good mark, there needs to be, so you do your walk pirouette, and if you can picture that diagram that we looked at before, when you have got back to the track, you change the flexion and you do a transition out to an active walk. What tends to, okay, we'll just go on to the next one, as that shows the faults. Yes, people think that a walk pirouette is you slow down to do it. You may want to slow down to teach the horse, but when you do it in a test, you want to be keeping the same tempo. And some riders like to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Others like to count with the front legs 1, 2, 1, 2. Another fault is that the inside hind leg crosses in front, so it looks more like a leg yielding turn. So what you think of when you do a walk pirouette is little steps behind. So the inside hind legs does not move to the outside of the outside hind leg. Then often the horse gets halfway round and then the rider just changes the flexion to the new inside. The whole of the pirouette needs to have the flexion to the inside. Then it's changed the other way around. And then, yes, so often there's no clear flexion because it's already been lost. No clear ending we've talked about. Yeah, the other thing that tends to happen is it starts at a marker, but it finishes about 5 meters down the track from where it started. So that's what happens if you don't shorten the steps in the preparation. The first few steps of the walk pirouette will be huge steps with the hind legs, and that takes you way off the track. So that's why you have to have little steps to start with, and then keep the little steps. You also do what we call working pirouettes, where you actually on purpose come on a bigger area. The Germans call that a half passade. So it's like they just come out, but the whole time they're keeping the horse's tail facing where you started the pirouette, and they're keeping the flexion to the way in which they're going. So anyone that's interested, just look up a half passade, P-A-S-S-A-D-E. Okay. Now, I do an awful lot of shoulder in, and it is extremely useful, and it's not shown in any tests. Just because it's not in a test doesn't mean to say that you're not going to do it. You're actually going to do it a lot more than you do shoulder in or anything else. Now, it's the same as, can we just go to the next slide and then come back to this? Yeah, so the one on the left is shoulder 4. And the one on the right is shoulder in. And you can see that you've got the flex on the shoulder 4, that you've got the flexion up at the pole, but you haven't got the angle coming out, which the second one has. Okay, so now if we can go back, please. Yeah. So it keeps the horse in balance. Whatever faults you get here, you'll have in your other lateral work as well, which is the same actually as leg yielding. So it's a straightening exercise, but it also engages the hindquarters. So it's straightening and balancing. And it's used for preparation for shoulder in and for travers and for half pass. And it can also be used if you have the quarters in canter. It's a very good exercise. And the preparation for half pass, it's also used in canter as well as in trot. Okay. So now the shoulder in, here you can see, these are the diagrams from the FEI. The outside front leg and the inside hind leg should be in line. If you get too much angle, you actually lose the bend. So it's 30 degrees from the wall, approximately 30 degrees. In the rules, it says that if you have to do shoulder in into a circle, that you keep the shoulder in. If you then are going to go straight down the long side, then you have to straighten it. So it says at the end, the shoulders align with the hindquarters, which means they go straight, unless followed by a circle or half pass. The other thing is that when you ride a corner, when you do shoulder in that comes up to the short side, you're better off finishing it in not completely straightening. You're better off doing shoulder 4, and then you can get a nice bend through the corner, or you just keep the angle. But people that try to straighten and then ride a corner, if you actually think about it and how long it would take to do 2 strides or even 1 stride of straightness, you actually haven't got room to do it. So practice and get somebody to have a look and video you doing different types of riding the corner at the end. And what do you think how do you think the horse does it best? Okay. So if you look, this is how to ride it. If you look down the track of the shoulders, this helps to keep the same angle. Whereas if you're looking at the long side, you tend to lose the angle that you've got. If you check the flexion with the inside hand, every second or third time, the inside front leg is on the ground. And because it's on the ground, you've stabilized it. So you can then do a tiny check the flexion, and that also helps to keep the angle the same. And then you're thinking about your seat, keeping the tempo and the rhythm. Now, the timing. You want the outside front leg to move across down the long side, and then the inside front leg follows and very slightly crosses, but there's not a lot of crossing. It's more following the outside front leg. So then you've got to work out when you want to give the aid. You want the outside front leg to be moving down the long side. So then that means the inside front leg will be on the ground when you give the aid. And then you may use outside leg, also encourages the forward. Okay. Now, the good qualities are that it's a regular trot with the rhythm and a consistent bend and engagement with the inside hind leg, and the pole stays the highest point. Be careful when you finish if you've then got to the corner, because when you go around corners, it's very easy for the horses to drop their pole because it makes it easier for them. They don't have to engage the inside hind legs so much. And the quarters stay on the track. Now, the main errors is that the inside hind leg doesn't bend, so you get too much angle, and so then you can't get the engagement. The angle and the bend change, and the quarters, some people incorrectly teach that if you want to do shoulder in, you just push the quarters out. That is not what you want, because you actually want the bend, you want the shoulders coming in. It can be on the forehand and it can be not accurate. When you have tenseness, you will have a swishing tail, which the judges don't like. And you will also have, if the horse is crooked, it's going to use its head to balance itself, which means it's going to tilt its head. And the other very common fault is that the horse has more bend in its head than in its body. And the next illustration shows that. Oh no, it doesn't. This is just how it's ridden in 1.1 and 1.2. You've got shoulder in, 2 10-meter half circles, shoulder in. So you come around the corner and you do your shoulder in. Then when you're riding your 2 10-meter circles, whenever you ride little circles, you need to be counting the strides. Both halves of the circle should have the same number of strides. But here you're just doing the half circle. But you take the new outside rein as on the second quarter of the half circle. So when you come straight, all you have to do is get the new flexion and get the new bend. You can't ride 2 10-meter circles of correct shape because they join at one point. We can, as humans, because we've only got 2 legs on the ground, so we can go to X and then go the other way. But the horse has got the length of his body, which has to be straight facing A or C for one stride, which means you've got to get there early, because you want to be starting the second half circle at X, and then you come around and then you can do your shoulder in the other way. Now, the easy way and the really good way to get into shoulder in is you come round the corner, you do 1 stride of shoulder 4, which gives you control of the inside shoulder. Then you go into shoulder in. It doesn't show, it just shows, wow, that was really smooth into a really good angle. If you come around the corner and you go straight into shoulder in, then it's chance what angle you have. And it's very easy to get too much, and then you lose it, and then you get, so it's inconsistent. But if you use the shoulder in just for 1 stride, then the shoulder 4 for 1 stride, then the quality of the shoulder in is much greater. Okay. And here, this just shows too much bend in the neck, and also this tilting, which happens so often. And it's just the horse using his head and neck to balance. Okay. Now, travers. So there are 2 ways of teaching it. One is that you come round the corner and you don't let the quarters come onto the track. I tend not to do that way, because it's what I want to do is teach the horse one thing at a time. When you do it this way, you have to jam all your aids on at once, and it's very difficult to have it correct. So I do it this way. You come onto the long side And it doesn't matter how long you take, and I'd also do it in walk first until the horse understands. Doesn't matter how long you take to get into it. All the little steps have to be correct first. So you come onto the long side and you check the roundness, and then you check the flexion to the inside. But you only want a tiny flexion. You want to keep the head and neck straight on the track. Then the important leg is actually the inside leg, and you hold it on the girth, and that is controlling the inside shoulder. Then you put your outside leg back and ask the quarters to come in. Your shoulders and hips stay parallel to the horse's. And when you're teaching the horse, just ask for one stride. You ask for a response, and when you get the response, then you release it. Then you ask again. So on the long side, you might do 3 lots of one stride of travers. And then once the horse understands that, then you can ask for a couple of strides. And then you do the same thing, which is you check the flexion every couple of strides as the inside front leg is on the ground, and you're looking down the track because that's where the head and neck is. Okay. And here we've got the flexion. So here we've got the travers and the flexion, and the inside leg is controlling the shoulders, and then the outside leg is back, pushing the quarters in. Okay. So now the thing about the travers is, so they're bent in the direction of travel, and if you have a look at these lines, there's a big gap between them. There's a big gap, a little gap, and a big gap. And that is what you want. If you get too much bend, then you end up with a little gap, big gap in the middle, little gap. And then the horses just get stuck. They just can't do it. It's not what's asked for. This is what is asked for. So it's like in the shoulder in, getting more angle than you're asked for actually spoils the quality. Okay. And in 1.3, you do shoulder in. So you're going to come around the corner, shoulder 4, shoulder in. Then you don't straighten, you go straight onto the circle. Now, there's 10 marks for shoulder in, 10 for the circle, and 10 for travers. So you want to, what tends to happen is, because people are getting ready to do the travers, is the second half of the circle ends up with the quarters in, but you've got equal marks. So you want to nearly finish. So you're counting your strides. So your circle is going to be a good shape. And then as you finish it, so you're going to finish 1 meter before the marker, and then you're going to hold the bend with the inside leg and ask for the travers. But just be careful that you don't lose marks for the circle, because it's judged in its entirety. Okay. And renvers is the same with the big gap, little gap, big gap. And the head and neck is parallel to the long side and flexed and bent away from the direction of travel. And if you come in shoulder in, okay, we'll go on to the next one. Okay, so this is showing that, you see, it's really the same thing, but in the travers on the left, you're pushing the quarters in, whereas in the renvers, which is on the right side, you're bringing the shoulders out. So you've got to bring the shoulders out and get the head and neck straight. And in one of the, I think maybe on the next one. No, it's not. That's fine. Oh, yeah. So when you go from shoulder in to renvers, which is in one of the tests, the shoulder in has less angle than the renvers does. So when you're going, so you're in shoulder in, and then when you get to E and B, you have to change to renvers. And you do it by, first you take your new outside rein out to where you want the shoulders to be. Then you change the flexion and you've got your new inside leg, which will now be on the outside of the arena. But if you don't bring the shoulders out further, then you can't get enough angle in the renvers. And then it just doesn't look very good. But when you ride it really well, it looks terrific. So just have a look at it. The shoulder in has less angle than the renvers. And so we've talked about this. Yes, okay. Yeah, so it's taking the shoulders where you want to be. Now, travers is the same as half pass, except travers goes down the long side and half pass goes across the diagonal. But the horse is bent in the direction which it's going. Okay. So in the half pass, it's in the suspension that they move over. So you can see if you've only got a little collected trot, then you're only going to have a little half pass. And it's really lovely when the horse has got lots of activity and lots of suspension, and they just look as if they're floating across. If you, a lot of the books, it says you do shoulder in into the half pass, but the problem is if you actually do shoulder in, you've then got too much angle. You've got the shoulders leading too much. So just going through shoulder 4 gives you exactly the right angle to then be able to get the half pass. So that's something that you need to experiment with. And if so, when you do half pass, you just sail across the arena, and it shouldn't be luck where you end up. So if you come around and you get the horse's face facing the marker where you want to end up, or it may be a meter before the marker on the long side, then you'll find it's much easier to keep the bend. So it's all about, so the judges see all the time, 2 good strides of half pass, then they lose the bend, and then they end up leg yielding across. But that will not happen if you come around the corner, go through shoulder 4, which gives you the control of the inside shoulder. Then you get the horse's face facing where you want to end up, and then you just go. And that's really nice. And then the timing, the horse is moving over in the suspension. So you're keeping the bend and you're moving the horse over, but don't forget you will muddle the horse if you give 2 aids at the same time. So it may be that you hold your inside leg on and then you're giving the aid with the outside leg. Just depends on the horse and how it's straight. But if you just remember, horses can't interpret 2 aids at once. Okay, next one. So to school half pass, you want to be able to do travers on the diagonal. And so you come round the corner, you get the head and neck facing the marker, you go across, you can go all the way one way, or you can get to X and then change and do travers the other way. You can and really nice exercise is the second one down, where you do travers from K to R, and then you do R to M in renvers. So as you get to the long side, you're keeping the bend to the right, but then it turns into renvers. Yes, you can come across the whole diagonal changing. You can also do KX, you leg yield to the right. And interestingly, leg yield to the right is actually leg yield left, but now they've given up trying to do that because horse is flexed left. So that's why correctly written, it says leg yield to the right. So you've come round the corner, change the flexion, leg yield across, then you do one stride of shoulder 4 left, and then you come into half pass left. Then another nice one that they do in Vienna, but they never do it when there's anybody watching, is they'll go across the whole diagonal, alternating. So they'll leg yield, then they'll change the bend. Then if they start to lose the activity, they'll go back to leg yielding, and then so on across. If you're doing half pass right from K and you lose the flexion and bend, then you want to go towards the short side in shoulder in or shoulder 4, and then recommence with the half pass. But if you've lost the flexion and the bend, don't keep doing it. Just go straight, reorganize, and then start again. Okay. So simple change is 3 steps, 3 to 5 steps. It's an uneven number of steps because if you do 2 or 4, you'll end up on the same leg again. So you shorten the steps in canter, and you can practice not actually stopping, because when you look at problems with simple changes, it's the preparation that you need to be working on. So you shorten the steps, then you ride on again, then you shorten the steps, and then there'll be one little window of opportunity where your horse is balanced and you're able to stop your seat from cantering, and then the horse will go straight into walk. Making the circle smaller. So you come on a 20-meter circle, then you make it 15, then you come into 10. And as you make it the circle smaller, you make the steps a little bit shorter, and then the horse will be much more balanced to be able to walk. But we see far too many people schooling simple changes by falling into trot and jabbing the horses in the mouth. That is not going to give you a confident result. So it just takes time for the horse to be able to keep his hind legs underneath him and actually be balanced enough to go canter to walk. Yeah, and it's because the riders don't have enough patience that horses end up fizzing when they do this. So you walk, you get the new flexion, and then you canter. The important thing is that you give the canter aid as the inside front leg is on the ground. So many of the problems happen because the horse is actually doing what it's being asked to do, which is canter on the same leg again. And if you do the short diagonal first, then it becomes very obvious to the horse that it's going to be cantering on the other way. If they jog, don't canter, because if the horse jogs in when you walk and then you canter, you're actually teaching the horse to do this. So whatever you let the horse do, you're actually telling them is correct. So if he jogs, then walk, and then you just need to do a lot of canter into walk until the horse takes the contact. Because what happens when they do it incorrectly is you've lost the contact. And so then when you haven't got the contact, you can't actually control the walk. Okay. So this is where it is in the in 1.1 that you have counter canter, simple change, true canter. And then in 1.3 on the long side, you're in true canter, then you come into counter canter, and then you go through the short side in, I can't remember, I think it may be a half circle. And then in 1.4, you're on a 3-loop serpentine with simple changes as you cross the center line. And you also have one down the center line, which is a true test of, is your horse straight? So that would be something that I would be schooling not on the center line, first of all, because you don't want to stuff it up. Now, when you see this 3-loop serpentine, so if you have to do simple changes, you have to you can't ride it like that because the horse is too long. So you want to be, you have to be straight facing the long side for one stride. But that means you've got to square out the turn that brings you crossing over the center line. So work it out, because if your shape isn't exactly right, then it's very hard for the horse to be able to be very smooth and get a really good mark for that. Okay. So, and the counter, 1.1 ME change rein, EV counter, and then you do the simple change. And then 1.3, 10-meter circle left, then the simple change, then counter, and then you come on a short diagonal. Okay. Now, flying changes. So this happens in the moment of suspension. So if you have a little canter, you will only ever get little flying changes, and they won't have a lot of exuberance to them. Now, so what happens, you're cantering right with the outside hind and so on. Then the old inside hind becomes the new outside hind. And then you get the new sequence. Okay. So there are different ways of, so the prerequisites are really important. So you want to be able to get immediate canter transition. So when you say canter from a walk or a trot, it has to happen straight away. Then you want the simple changes, you want good counter, and a quality canter. In the counter, you have as much flexion or bend to the outside that you would have had to the inside. So if you're in counter on a 20-meter circle, you will have only really flexion, because on a 20-meter circle, you don't have a lot of bend. And on the straight line, the counter is flexed to the leading leg, but it is not bent. And you get way too much bending to the inside. And that's when horses get unbalanced and then they become disunited. So there are 2 exercises that I do before the flying change. One is in canter on a circle, you change the flexion to the outside. So you change the flexion, have about 2 or 3 strides, then you change it back to the inside. So you're just teaching the horse this new concept of changing the flexion. But you keep your inside leg on, so there's no confusion. Then the other thing is you move your inside leg back and then you put it forward again. And so you're cantering on the circle and you bring it back and you put it forward again. And if you do those 2 things, then when you come to do the change, the horse isn't suddenly affronted because you're doing these things he hasn't had a chance to understand. So by moving your leg and changing the flexion, the horse can actually understand. Then you need to decide your method. So are you going to do it over a pole? Are you going to do it out of counter on a circle, 10-meter half circle, and return to the long side? I tend to do that way, and if that doesn't work, then I'll do it over a pole. The thing about doing it over a pole is that the horse actually often jumps over it, and then the first leg to land will be the inside front leg. But when they do a flying change, the first leg is the outside hind. But when you teach them over a pole and then you don't have the pole, they don't seem to have that problem. Then you have to decide on the sequence of aids. And this is a very individual thing with what the horse likes the feel of. So are you going to change the flexion? So when are you going to change it? Beforehand? The main thing is, if your horse is dead straight, he's able to change. The problems with not changing through are mostly because the horse isn't forward or because he's tense, but the main reason is because he's crooked. So that's why the better the quality of the canter, the better the changes will be. And you can go 3, 2 on 1, change the aids, and then you can give the aid, or you can change the flexion first, or you can change it afterwards. It's just, horses are very individual with what they like. But you're changing the inside, the position of your legs, and then the weight comes into the inside seat bone. But I find if you think about staying straight in the saddle, it's automatically going to come into the inside seat bone. What you don't want it to do is to go to the outside seat bone. But if you do a lot of moving your bum in the saddle, then the horse can't interpret that, doesn't understand what it means, and it puts him out of balance. Okay. So this comes back to the 4 squares of learning. So does the horse understand the concept of changing the legs in the suspension? And you can't hurry learning. You just create tension, and then the result's a poor result. So if some of the horses change, I was teaching a horse today that did a change and it went whoosh off afterwards. So if the horse rushes off, then you need to do a change and then walk, or do a change and then trot. Give them a pat and say, very good. If the horse doesn't speed up, then you don't need to stop. But when you have a good change, don't do any more. So you teach your horse. It's difficult because you've got to do it enough times for the horse to understand. But when you get a good one, don't then say, I'll just do another one, because they tend not to work. So be happy with one good change to start with. Okay. And then the faults late behind, it can be a split second. Now that's the difficult one, because the horse very quickly gets used to being just a split second late. Whereas if it's several strides late, where it actually becomes disunited, then when they get it correct, then they're often not late behind. So it's when they're a split second late that you are going to end up with it automatic incorrect. So it's probably going to be a straightness thing. It may be that the horse doesn't quite like your aids, but have a really good look at it. Have a really good analysis of why is it a split second late. So the causes can be crooked with the horse falling onto the new inside shoulder, and then the outside hind legs left behind. So it can't come through with the hind leg. If the quarters are in your true canter, when you're getting ready to do a flying change the other way, they also, the hind legs just can't get run. They're just left behind. Often the horse anticipates and it changes before you ask it to, but it only changes in front, and then the hind legs goes clonkety clonk behind you. And then the horse can rush onto the forehand. And when that happens, then you lose the suspension, and it's in the suspension that you get the change happening. So doing it over poles is really quite a good way of doing it. It's actually done in Germany as well. It's actually written in the German handbook of training coaches. So that's an okay way of doing it. Okay. So yeah, leaping through the change, or if they're late in front, that's so you get a horse and it does a huge leap in the air. That's mostly caused by the rider restricting them. And the thing is, if you're sitting on a horse and it does an enormous leap with a change, it's really difficult to be able to control yourself enough to allow with the new inside hand the next time you do it, because you feel that you've got to keep hanging on so you don't fall off. Yes, and it can be just that the timing isn't what the horse really likes. So when he loses the rhythm, you've probably got a poor quality canter, or he hurries through the changes. And this is where videoing is really good. So happy training and competing, be fussy, be very fussy, but be fussy in a positive way and enjoy the journey. So thank you, Kathleen. You've got to go back, Kathleen. Back.
Go back here. Okay.
Thank you very much, because Kathleen got my completely raw PowerPoints and she's put them into looking very nice. So thank you very much for all 3 presentations.
My pleasure, Mary. Thank you. That was really inspiring. You feel like just going out and jumping on a horse and having a go and testing all those little tricks out. So thank you very much. I think we might check if there are any questions in our chat, because
the next one was just about my DVDs.
Oh, yes. Yes, so Mary's got a fantastic box set of DVDs, and I've watched them myself, and they're a really fabulous viewing for coaches and riders as well. So we're going to put them into the Pony Club Victoria online shop. So I've got Jen onto that. Hopefully she'll have that up in I guess not tomorrow because it's public holiday, but maybe Monday or Tuesday she'll have that up. So when it's up, I'll send out a bit of an email and let everybody know. And yeah, so that's $60 for the set of 3, and $10 of that Mary's kindly donating back to the organisation, which is really fabulous, and that would be mailed out to you. And then Mary also has some on her own website, she has some ebooks. So I've just put the information up there if you want to check out her website to see those as well. So so if you have any questions, pop them in the chat now, because I'm sure that there was something that you might have needed more information with. But it was very thorough, Mary. I must say. Oh, here we go. Thank you, Jill. So Jill started off, Mary, can you please clarify the difference between the horse taking the contact rather than the rider taking the contact?
Yes. So what you're looking at is the rider holding the horse? So first it has to be in a round outline, and it has to be in self-carriage. And then you look at, is it staying in that outline because the rider is pulling on the reins and holding the horse there, or is the horse confident enough in its contact that it's actually towing the rider along, not pulling, but you just feel this connection. And then when you're getting it, so you're probably, so how I teach it is I'll say to a rider, okay, so you're pulling, you have to pull, you're checking the roundness. Now it's right. Now can your hands go 2 millimeters forward, and does the horse take the contact? Because a lot of times horses would be on the bit, but they're not allowed to be because the rider is pulling back. They're holding the horse in an outline. Does that answer your question?
I think that was a very good explanation, Mary. With riders doing their medium and extended trots, I had a question in terms of judging that movement. So can you maybe reiterate the importance of the transitions in and out?
Yes. So The difference, first of all, between medium and extended is if you don't have to show, if you only have to do medium, the judge can't say too much medium because they don't know how much extension you could have. So that's the first thing. So don't, if you don't have both, but the medium has more roundness to it. It has more height and it has more, so it's just rounder, whereas the extension is a maximum lengthening. So the frame gets a little bit longer in extension, but it doesn't drop down. So show a few lengthened strides, the pole is going to go a little bit lower. Then in the medium, the pole is higher as it is in the, so it's a moderate lengthening, whereas the extension is the maximum lengthening that a horse can do. It doesn't matter which you're doing. If you're doing it on the, across the diagonal on the long side, your seat is what controls it. So you've been going with a big movement with your seat, then you check the roundness, and then your seat feels the collection, but you may need, so you check the roundness and then you half halt. So if you just come across and you only half halt, but you haven't actually checked the roundness, then the horses are going to come above the bit. And with some horses and with younger horses, particularly if you're in extended canter or medium canter, you check the roundness, you steady, and then you steady again, because they can't get from a really good extended canter back to collected canter in 2 strides. It's going to take them a much longer time. Whereas when you get to Grand Prix, the horse has got much better balance and the hind legs are underneath them and the front end is up more. So then they're able to do a much quicker transition. So what the judges will be looking at advanced and grade 1 is it smooth and is there a difference? And is it done without resistance?
Thank you. That's a very good answer. Our next question is, how would you help a rider horse combination when the horse has a head tilt?
Okay. Well, you have to analyze. So horses tilt their heads because they're falling on the outside shoulder. If they're falling in, they wiggle their heads from side to side because the rider tries to get them to look in, and then the horse says, oh, I've got to put my head out. So you get a wiggle. When you get a tilting head, it's because the horse is falling out. And there are 2 things I check first of all when I see that is, has it got a tooth problem? And is the saddle too tight in the wither area? Because if the saddle is too tight, then and here where we get droughts and then we get masses of grass, so horses change shapes so often here, is if it's tight on the withers, the horse actually can't turn. The saddle is stopping the horse being able to turn, and when it can't turn and it falls out, then it tilts its head to balance. And if it tilts its head in canter, then instead of doing a circle, you want to come on a 50-cent coin. So you're actually controlling the outside shoulder. And with a horse like that, you would be doing a lot more shoulder 4 than you would shoulder in.
Thank you. Sally Francis has given us a bit of a tip. She says, teaching riders with a disability is such a helpful resource for inclusive coaching to all the coaches out there. So is that a book?
Yes,
Mary?
It's the book on the right.
Oh, of course it is. Yes. So, yeah, thank you, Sally.
Thank you, Sally.
And I think that is all for our questions. So if there aren't any more, I'd just like to say thank you, Mary, for doing the 3 presentations. They've certainly been very valuable, and the feedback from coaches and riders and parents has been extremely positive, and we've loved having you help Pony Club Victoria, and we hope to keep you in our fold and have you work with us again. So
thank you for having me. I seem to be in the pitch dark now. I hadn't realised.
I noticed that. That's okay. The light's getting a bit later these days.
I simply hadn't noticed because the screen's got light on it.
So thank you for all our attendees for coming in tonight, and also for coming in on the previous evenings. I will share the presentation recording in the next day or two. So, and if you have any questions, just send an email through to me at ncas@ponyclubvic.org.au. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Sharon just asked how long the recordings last for. I think they last for as long as Zoom exists. So we get a link, and while Zoom keep those links, we keep the video. So and we'll be finding a place for them on the website as well. So and we always pop them up on the Facebook page the next day or the day after. So have a look for them there as well. All right. Good evening, everyone. And thank you, Mary.
My pleasure.
See you all next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Is everybody gone?
Just turning our recording off. There we go.